Welcome back to Read This Next with Laura and Nicole. This week we are talking about essay collections and memoirs.
Yeah, so these ones tend to be more like, rather than a full autobiography or biography, they tend to be more about specific times in someone's life, or maybe like a connection, a collection of related incidences in someone's life.
Yeah, we've got a whole bunch. I was telling Laura before this, we tried not to just pick like comedians, because we all know where to find the comedian memoirs and they're really good, but we wanted to kind of branch everybody out from them and find some new stuff too.
So there's a real mix.
There's a huge mix. It's good. We got some graphics in there. It's gonna be good. All right, I'll let you get started.
Okay. So our first one is called Wow, No Thank You by
title.
Samantha Irby. It's a good title. Okay, so she's had other books before. This is her most recent one. A new essay collection from Samantha Irby about aging, marriage, settling down with stepchildren in white small-town America. Irby is turning 40. I will be there soon enough. And increasingly uncomfortable in her own skin, she has left her job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, has published successful books, and is courted by Hollywood, left Chicago, and moved into a house with a garden that requires repairs and know-how with her wife and 2 stepchildren in a small white Republican town in Michigan, where she now hosts book clubs.
Yay!
Goodness, this is the bourgeoisie life of dreams. She goes on bad dates with new friends, spends weeks in Los Angeles taking meetings with skinny, luminous peoples, while being a cheese fry eating, slightly damp Midwest person with neck pain and no cartilage in her knees, and hides Entenmann's cookies under her bed and unopened bills under her pillow.
Classic.
So sounds like, yes, a bit of a classic memoir in the sort of coming of age. Only it's the like middle age coming of age.
Coming of middle age.
Right, the first time. Yeah. Coming of age to middle age. Yeah. Some of those things, like making new friends when you're older.
It's hard.
It can be very hard to do. I mean, especially last year, nobody's making any new friends, let's be honest. So no one goes anywhere. But yeah, it sounds funny. This one is definitely a comedic essay collection.
Yeah, it looks good. I gotta say, the description of cheese fry eating, slightly damp Midwestern person kind of grossed me out a bit. And I was like, I think that was the intention, but like,
I think so. The slightly damp part.
Yeah, just like not damp, just slightly damp.
A little damp.
Just a little. Okay, the next one is The Right to Be Cold, One Woman's Story of Protecting Her Culture, the Arctic, and the Whole Planet. It's by Sheila Watt Coulter. Okay, this is the description. The Arctic ice is receding each year, but it is the Arctic ice is receding each year, but just as irreplaceable as the culture, the wisdom that has allowed the Inuit to thrive in the far north for so long. What?
Just as irreplaceable is the culture.
Oh, okay, I missed the word. Okay. The Arctic ice is receding each year, but just as irreplaceable is the culture, the wisdom that has allowed the Inuit to thrive in the far north for so long. That makes more sense. And it's not just the Arctic. The whole world is changing in dangerous, unpredictable ways. Sheila Watt Coulter has devoted her life to protecting what is threatened and nurturing what has been wounded. I'm reading these sentences wrong cadence. In this culmination of Watt Coulter's regional, national, and international work over the last 25 years, The Right to Be Cold explores the parallels between safeguarding the Arctic and the survival of Inuit culture, of which her own background is an extraordinary example. This is a human story of resilience, commitment, and survival told from the unique vantage point of an Inuk woman who, in spite of many obstacles, rose from humble beginnings in the Arctic to become one of the most influential and decorated environmental, cultural, and human rights advocates in the world. And I'm pretty sure she's Canadian.
Sounds very interesting and also inspiring,
And
you know,
timely.
and timely. Yes, certainly. We have been working on developing a climate change collection. This book would fit quite well in there of,
Mm-hmm.
nonfiction works about that, but also memoirs, and then also some different science fiction works that are kind of climate change catastrophes often. But
Mm-hmm.
that book would fit very well in that section as well.
Absolutely. I think it's in our IKC though, so
That makes sense.
yeah, but very good. I like hearing it from I think it'll be good to hear it from someone who isn't a white person and also a Canadian, because Canadian, I feel like we always get American climate change advocates and things like that, but to hear it from home makes it a little bit more personal.
I agree. And just to say, IKC stands
Oh,
for Indigenous Knowledge Center.
yeah,
All of our branches have one where it's yeah, just a collection of exclusively works written by Indigenous peoples. Just fiction, nonfiction, all sorts of stuff.
hmm
I realized after listening to a previous episode, every once in a while we say something that we should explain, but we don't.
Oops,
So there's an explanation for that one.
my bad.
Okay, so our next one is relevant to my interests. It is called Good Boy, My Life in Seven Dogs
Aw,
by Jennifer Finney Boylan. I haven't even counted. I'm not sure if I have had seven dogs, but it has a great looking little cover with a gray little dog on it.
in
Hmm.
rainbow.
In rainbow. This is a book about dogs, the love we have for them, and the way that love helps us understand the people we have been. It's in the love of dogs and my love for them that I can best now take the measure of the child I once was and the bottomless, unfathomable desires that once haunted me. There are times when it is hard for me to fully remember that love, which was once so fragile and so fierce. Sometimes it seems to fade before me, like breath in a mirror, but I remember the dogs.
Aw,
Right? It's a universal account of a remarkable story, showing how a young boy became a middle aged woman, accompanied by seven crucial moments of growth and transformation by seven memorable dogs. Everything I know about love, she writes, I learned from dogs. Their love enables us to pull off what seem like impossible feats, to find our way home when we are lost, to live our lives with humor and courage, and above all, to best become our true selves.
that's very sweet.
Hmm.
So if I'm interpreting that correctly, this is an LGBTQ plus book.
Correct. This is a trans author um, about, presumably, we'll be covering their transition in addition to their pets. And I think that's such an interesting and kind of smart lens. Like it can be, I find it definitely can be difficult to remember how you felt about things when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can tie it to a specific pet or a specific, encounter or incident, then sometimes that will bring a lot more back.
That's true.
I'm sure it would make me think about all the dogs that I've had.
Ah, I like
Yeah,
that,
good
like you
dogs.
said, the time period is interesting because, it's really hard to be like, what year was that? But you can remember who was around. I do it by hair color now, but which is
Yeah,
weird. But and before that, it was like what year of school I was in. But now it's
right.
just like I don't know what year that was. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks good. Okay, next one, Educated by Tara Westover. Tara Westover was 17 the first time she set foot in a classroom. Born to survivalists in the mountains of Idaho, she prepared for the end of the world by stockpiling home canned peaches and sleeping with her head for the hills bag. In the summer, she stewed herbs for her mother, a midwife and a healer, and in the winter, she salvaged in her father's junkyard. So already very different from the last one that we did.
Very much so. You know what? It's funny
Mm.
because it sounds like it's it sounds like it's going to be like a YA
It sounds like fiction.
dystopian or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. But no, it's not. Anyway, carry on.
Her father forbade hospitals, so Tara never saw a doctor or a nurse. Gashes and concussions, even burns from explosions, were all treated at home with herbalism. The family was so isolated from mainstream society that there was no one to ensure the children received an education and no one to intervene when one of Tara's older brothers became violent. Then, lacking any formal education, Tara began to educate herself. She taught herself enough mathematics and grammar to be admitted to the Brigham Young University, where she studied history, learning for the first time about important world events like the Holocaust and the Civil Rights Movement. Her quest for knowledge transformed her, taking her over oceans and far across continents to Harvard and Cambridge. Only then she would wonder if she traveled too far, if there was still a way home. So Educated is an account of the struggle for self-invention. It's a tale of fierce family loyalty and of the grief that comes with severing the closest ties. With the acute insight that distinguishes all great writers, Westover has crafted a universal coming-of-age story that gets to the heart of what education is and what it offers, the perspective to see one's life through new eyes and the will to change it. That's a really well-written description.
It is. This book came out a couple of years ago, huge New York Times bestseller. But if you've missed it at the time, maybe try picking it up now. It's on my shelf.
I noticed
another
a lot
one
of them were.
Yes. Yeah. It's also literally on my shelf. My mother lent me her copy.
Oh, nice.
Yes, but that's such an interesting, like that final line about like what the heart of education, the perspective to see one's life through new eyes and the will to change it. And I think that that's so much what we think about literature, right? That one of the things it does is it offers the windows and mirrors, right? The perspective to see other people's lives and also to see your own life reflected. Yeah, interesting. The education and yeah, the will to change it. That's something that we don't normally think about as part of the, encountering literature process, but maybe it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I guess reading in itself is a will to learn more about other things that are going on.
It's true.
Some of the time.
It's true.
Anyways, I think you're up next.
I am. Okay. So this next one is called They Said This Would Be Fun. Race, Campus Life, and Growing Up by Eternity Martis. And this book is fairly recent as well. And Canadian author. Okay, so here's the description. A book smart kid from Toronto. Eternity Martis was excited to move away to Western University for her undergraduate degree. But as one of the few Black students there, she soon discovered that the campus experiences she'd seen in movies were far more complex in reality. Over the next 4 years, Eternity learned more about what someone like her brought out in other people than she did about herself. She was confronted by white students in blackface at parties, dealt with being the only person in color in class, and was tokenized by her romantic partners. She heard racial slurs in bars, on the street, and during lectures. And she gathered labels she never asked for: abuse survivor, token, bad feminist. But by graduation, she found an unshakable sense of self and a support network of other women of color. Using her award-winning reporting skills, Eternity connects her own experience to the systemic issues plaguing students today. It's a memoir of pain and also resilience.
Wow. That one line where, what was it? She learned more about what someone like her brought out in other people. That's something you remember for years, just that line alone.
Yeah. So I read this one and I picked it up in part because I went to university, to Western. Well, I went to university in general, but specifically to Western University. And I think about the same time she was there, actually. And for many reasons, I had a very different experience. But interesting for me as someone who was in the town, right? So some of the different things she references, I was like, yeah, they're like, racism is a huge issue in the city of London, Ontario. Like it's a huge issue many places, but it's known to be a thing in London, Ontario. Like there was just intolerant people. There was neo-Nazis protesting at their pride parade.
Ew.
Which is something that like thankfully I've never encountered in Thunder Bay. So I found that really shocking. And a lot of what comes up in this book are things that obviously I didn't experience, but they all rang very true. It's like all this, it sounds like not only, yeah, I'm rambling a little bit. I thought it was really good. If you have been in if you attended university, wherever you attended university or college, um, I think it has a lot to interesting things to say about how we define ourselves and how we define ourselves as young people in relation to other people. Uh, yeah, and it makes you confront things about yourself as a white person, things that I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't really considered. It's quite good.
Yeah, it sounds like because it was at Western, it really highlighted something different. It was a little more personal.
It was a little more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like I feel like this is another thing that you don't see. I feel like you don't hear as many Canadian stories, right? So it's something that is so specific. I think it's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually kind of surprised. I accidentally got 3 Canadian authors on this. 4?
Accidentally.
Yeah. Our last highlight is This Place 150 Years Retold, which is a graphic novel in the IKC, Indigenous Knowledge Center, at the library. There are it's a collection, so there's plenty of authors in it. I won't list off all of them, but the foreword is by Alicia Elliott, I believe. Okay, so explore the last 150 years through the eyes of Indigenous creators in the graphic novel anthology, This Place 150 Years Retold. Beautifully illustrated, these stories are an emotional and enlightening journey through magic realism, serial killings, psychic battles, and time travel. See how Indigenous people have survived a post-apocalyptic world since contact.
What an
Um,
interesting way to think about it.
right? Like they're not saying like this isn't untrue. It's
No,
just creative retellings of what happened.
just a way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
That it was an apocalypse, right, to their culture.
Yeah, I did include like someone's description of it because I thought it continued. It actually gave a bit of context to it. The one thing that I really wanted to mention was it does this person. Her name was Danny. She wrote a review on Goodreads about it. She said that it's different tribes across Canada, and she said each story begins with a brief introduction from the contributor, why they wrote the story, who it was inspired by, and then we are given a timeline of factual events in Indigenous history that often deal with the colonial entity that is called Canada and how it treated Indigenous people, which I think is really cool because it's going to be like a little bit of fiction, but also gives you the real exactly what happened, which I think is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Very nice graphic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we
All
have it
right.
as a book club bag.
Well, there you go. Well, that's good to know as well. So that's 10 copies that are available to be signed out all at once. And then you and your friends can all read it at the same time and
Mm-hmm.
discuss.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're on to our picks. So maybe I'll do mine first.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So my pick is called In the Dream House. It's by Carmen Maria Machado. And the description is pretty sparse. So I might just, I'll read that and then I'll tell you a little bit more about why I liked it. So,
Sounds good.
for years, Carmen Maria Machado had struggled to articulate her experiences in an abusive same sex relationship. In this extraordinarily candid and radically inventive memoir, Machado tackles a dark and difficult subject with wit, inventiveness, and an inquiring spirit, as she uses a series of narrative tropes, including classic horror themes, to create an entirely unique piece of work which is destined to become an instant classic. So that doesn't tell
Mm.
you much, really. It was so good. It was it was really, really immersive and visceral in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's also like the writing, the structure of the book is very um, postmodern, experimental. Each section of the book was, had a different little subtitle. It was like the dream house as something. So the dream house as thriller, the dream house as, each different thing. And it really, she does a lot of look at historical stuff, the ways that same-sex abuse was either in many time, like in many history, was like, oh, it doesn't exist. Well, because like relationships between women were like, what would they do together? Clearly that's not a thing. And then even when it was a thing, it was like, well, but women are so
Gentle, caring.
yes. And with, you know, other lesbians, and it'd be like, well, you know, we're getting away from men, and men are the ones who are violent and bring that sort of thing. So if there's not a way, again, like this is like the, you know, seeing what's happening in the world. If what's happening to you is invisible or is impossible because in the way the world's been defined, then how do you ever come to terms with it? So she ended up in this horrifying, abusive relationship, and she kept kind of keep telling herself like, oh, but you know, like we're both women, and so that's, you know, women are fiery and passionate, so this must be normal, this must be how lesbian relationships are. Really good, hard to read, and some super interesting, like when they say radically inventive, I don't, if you've ever, I don't even know if it's ever come up for most people, but if you've studied English, like after high school, one of the things that might have come up for you is that many fairy tale motifs emerge across the entire world. So like a story about like the Little Red Riding Hood, there's versions of that story around the world, and so there exists like a giant taxonomy of all these themes and tropes. And it's like as specific as, you know, okay, well, here's this type S19, you know, pregnant by eating an egg, pregnant by, you know, swimming in the ocean, that are like really specific things.
Yeah.
And one of the things she does as she goes through is she highlights all these, like she footnotes all these different sort of fairy tale tropes that appear in this story that come up in her life, and like how they all, like kind of how the stories we know, and then we use them when we're living through something to contextualize or to rationalize. It's so interesting.
That sounds cool.
It's so good.
I love a good book with footnotes, you know, like good footnotes.
Lots of footnotes. Yeah, just like almost it really is, in some ways it's a horror novel, like a survival. It's not a novel, it's a, you know, a memoir, but like horror and survival. And then at the same time, it's kind of a coming to terms with self and finding yourself. Just really friggin' good.
So pick that one up.
Yeah.
That's got, it sounds like, based on, I hear you talk about what books you've read every week, and this one sounds like it really impacted you. So it sounds good.
It did. Like if you've ever had a relationship, not necessarily, you know, what she experienced is on one end of a scale, but you know, even just a relationship with someone who was treating you badly and you were rationalizing it, like you'll recognize things in the way that she describes thinking and the way things play out.
Sounds good.
Yeah. How about yours? What was yours?
Mine was also kind of heavy, but it was a graphic novel, so it wasn't as okay, so it's The Fire Never Goes Out, a memoir and pictures by Noelle Stevenson. If you don't know who Noelle Stevenson is, where have you been? She is the creator of Lumberjanes. She's the artist for the cover of Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Didn't she do She-Ra?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's been all over the place. She really blew up, and Nimona. I always want to say Ninoma, but it's
Nimona.
Nimona.
I love the name. I suggested it to my partner, and he said, "Why would we name our child Pneumonia?" And I said, that's not what I said. But either way, it was a hard no,
And you were like,
unfortunately.
you're unfortunately correct. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Sorry for that aside. Carry on.
no, that's a side that needed to be there. But yeah, okay, so I'll read the collection and I'll tell you what I got. So from Noelle Stevenson, the New York Times bestselling author of Nimona, comes a captivating, honest, illustrated memoir that finds her turning an important corner of her creative journey and inviting readers along for the ride. So, in a collection of essays and personal mini comics that span 8 years of her young adult life, author illustrator Noelle Stevenson charts the highs and lows of being a creative human in the world. Whether it's hearing the wrong name called at her art school graduation ceremony or becoming a National Book Award finalist for her debut graphic novel Nimona, Noelle captures the little and big moments that make up a real life with wit, wisdom, and vulnerability that are all her own. So, I have mentioned before that I'm a Tumblr user. So she got her start on Tumblr, and she originally started posting like, I think it was like Sherlock memes, not memes, they're her drawings and funny takes of what's happening in these shows. So she would do like Hulk and Hawkeye. She would do just anything, and she would Lord of the Rings, I think, was her big one. And eventually she started her own graphic novel, and so each year on Tumblr she would kind of post her year in review, and this is that collection but then added in illustrations of what happened that year.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
at least that's what I'm pretty sure I got from it. It was, she said things like this got this many notes, which is how they define things on Tumblr, is how many reblogs it got.
Yeah.
So it's very good. And it's very sad. And she struggles with I think she struggles with bipolar. They never actually give a definition, but at the very beginning she thinks that's what she has. Um, and it follows how she's dealt with that over the years, and how she sees herself having this giant hole in her that she could never fill. It was very relatable, and because it was drawn, it was much easier to visualize. And like, that, like, if you've ever experienced mental health issues, you kind of know what the feeling is, but to describe that feeling can be very hard. And Noelle Stevenson does it in a very beautiful way. Oh no, I don't have it with me. It's in my other room, but I was going to show you a picture. And she also describes how she has this fire inside of her that is burning her alive, but it's also, she finds a way to make it fuel her in the end, which is really, really pretty. So it talks about self-care. I think she had 4 sections: depression, anxiety, self-care, and there was one more. I can't remember what it was, but it was very well done, and it was a nice arc in to things are what they are, and you just keep going, which was really nice. So if you're into memoirs that are but not super into reading big long ones, this one's nice because it's short, it's got lots of pictures, and it's very heartwarming and touching. So I really liked it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
My 10-year-old niece read it. She liked it.
Yeah.
She's a big Noelle Stevenson fan.
Yeah.
Because
That's
she's
a little
into
deep.
I know. She's a reading above her grade level, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea. It's interesting to me, the idea that some of it was written at different times,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because I go back and find bits of journals or notes or whatever from years past, and it's so wild to even connect that to the person I am now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sounds like a really interesting
Yeah. Because she would do
collection.
it at the end of every year. She would be like, 2012 was a good year. And then she would say what happened that year, good and bad. And then that chapter would show it in images, which was really cool. So it was an interesting way to do a graphic novel memoir.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So on that note,
that's our
We gave two kind of sad ones at the end, but
Yes, we
that's
started
life.
we started funny and lighter, and then we kind of brought it down at the end, but still
Ooh.
good. Still
Yeah.
good. Yes,
Oh
just
yeah, excellent.
different tone.
Yeah. And on that note, we will leave you with our parting words. Please like, follow, subscribe, leave us comments. We would love to hear from you. We're at TBAPL on all social medias. Rate us on your favorite podcast platform. It'll help other people find the show. And of course, you can always find our show notes for authors and titles at www.tbplofftheshelf.com. So we will see you guys all next week.
Bye.
Bye.